Sa ibang balita naman, conditional permanent residency. Yan ang sagot ng Citizenship and Immigration Canada para di magamit ang pagpapakasal para makakuha ng immigrant status sa bansa. Marjorie Carmona-Newman tells us more.
Coming to Canada as a sponsored spouse? Better make sure you're living with your sponsor for 2 years if you want to keep your permanent residency. It's what Immigration Canada calls a conditional permanent resident status, their answer to the growing number of marriage fraud in the country. In the past few years alone, numbers from the Canadian Border Services Agency shows 200 leads on possible cases of marriage fraud and 39 criminal investigations, including a possible syndicate involving arranged marriages to attain status in Canada.
Case where a Filipino paid 10,000 Canadian dollars to a Canadian spouse in order to become permanent resident. This is like a marriage of convenience, and this is of course not allowed in the Canadian immigration law. Later on, this Canadian spouse would like to get more money from the Filipina, but the Filipina is no longer willing to give more money. And so what the Canadian spouse did was he went to report it to immigration without knowing that he will also suffer the same consequence. Well, what happened next was both of them were charged of a crime of fraudulent marriage, and they were both in prison.
The new rule took effect last October. It applies to sponsored spouses in a relationship for less than 2 years and have no children with their sponsor as of application.
Changes to the Canadian immigration sponsorship law will also help Canadians and permanent residents be protected.
But there are exceptions to the rule.
This regulation does not apply to those who suffer abuse and neglect not only from their sponsor, but also from persons related to the sponsor. The exception also applies in case of death of the sponsor.
Conditional permanent residence does not differ from regular permanent residence other than the need to satisfy the 2-year requirement. Last March, the CIC also put a temporary ban on sponsored spouses from sponsoring a new spouse within 5 years after they become a permanent resident. Proof that the CIC is serious in ending marriage fraud for many Canadians. Marjorie Carmona-Newman for ABS-CBN News, Edmonton.